Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, my name is David Popovich, aka the Bookworm, and welcome back to Bookworm Reviews. Yes, it's been a while since I've done anything, but that happens when you're busy working at a film festival, moving, and good old-fashioned procrastination. Yeah, I really have no excuse why it took me this long to actually get back into the game. Part of me felt burned out and needed a vacation, and the other part was just being lazy. I'm human, what can I say? I is the worst. But now I finally got the kick in the pants I needed, and I'm ready to bring you a new string of reviews in this wonderful new location. At least I don't have the Goosebumps covers anymore. But before we get back to my traditional formats, I need you to take care of what I said last time. What did I say last time? But I'll be back in April, and yes, I am the worst. We have established that. Have I mentioned I'm a big fan of comic books? Ah, right. Comic books. I'm a huge fan of the medium. I've even talked about several examples like Black Sad, Mouse, and... That's all I ever talked about, isn't it? I mean, that would make sense. I built this as a book channel, not a comics channel. But I've said how even though books and comics are apples and oranges, they are still fruit. What I really want to talk about is a beginner's how-to guide on getting into comics because it can be scary. You enter a store or go to the comic section and you are bombarded by a host of different titles and characters and a constantly changing universe that you feel scared just to pick up the damn thing. I only really started to get into comics myself around 2010 when I discovered a comic shop that was right next to my college, and it's not easy. You think you're going to read a book about Spider-Man, only to find there are like several different volumes and titles and crossovers, and I just wanted to read about Spider-Man! But over the years, I've learned that that fear was both right and wrong. Here's the thing with comics. You just need to jump into it. If there are two things I would say to you, you should 1. Read books made in the last 10 years. Since if you've never read a comic book in your life and start with something from the 60s, 70s, 40s, or even 90s, you probably aren't going to get into the story as much since the writing style can be campy, overdramatic, sometimes basic. But if you compare comic storytelling from the 60s to now, you can see a clear evolution. And since we want you to actually enjoy a story, you best start recent. 2. Do not read single issues. Trust me, it is not a good way to start your journey with monthly broken stories that are most likely in the middle of a story arc or, God forbid, a tie-in to an event comic. Finding a good jumping on point to a series through single issues is very hard for most people to get into. You would be better off reading a trade, a collection of issues that overall presents a complete story. It's really the best way to collect comics, but it can still be complicated since in my journey collecting, I've seen there are about 4 different kinds of trades. Those would be title trades, character trades, creator trades, and story trades. What do I mean by those? Well, it depends on the comic and comic company. Most of the time you're going to find title trades, which are what you think they are. Collections based on the book's title. This applies to pretty much 90% of all books, but mostly for comics published outside of the big two, since most are standalone stories within their own universe compared to a shared one like DC or Marvel. It's pretty straightforward, but the rest of the categories relate to collecting from the big two. Because it turns out collecting stories about characters several decades old through multiple titles and events can be confusing for some reason. Who knew? That brings us to character trades, which are more of a hybrid on title trades, since a lot of the biggest players in comics didn't start off in their own book. Superman debuted in action, Batman detective, Spider-Man amazing fantasy, Thor journey into mystery, etc, etc. Most of which would then spin off into their own books, or in some cases, just take over the title completely. So when trades are collecting the early adventures of these characters, these collections will start at the beginning. You can't start off with Spider-Man without his origin in Amazing Fantasy 15, or Superman in Action number 1. That would just be stupid. But then we get to creator trades, which focuses on a particular run. Until recently, most comics just kept going as long as the sales are good. And when, say, a contract is up, a new team of writers and artists are brought on to either continue where things left off, or take the character in a full new direction. These are usually focused on runs that are held in high regard with fans, like Chris Claremont's run on X-Men, Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, George Perez's Wonder Woman, Stan Lee and Grant Morrison's anything. The same goes with artists, though most of the time you'll see these books marketed towards the writers outside of a few exceptions here or there. Lastly are the story trades, and these can be the hardest for some because when you're dealing with a shared universe with multiple titles, there will be times titles will cross over into other books to both show that yes, everything is connected and a way to get people to buy other books. So there are trades that will collect to present the full story, though that will not always be the case. Great example is this Age of Ultron trade. This edition collects the entire event plus all the tie-ins, which would make you think that the person in charge would take the time to organize it so that the book reads smoothly. Nope, instead it just takes the event trade and the tie-in trade and combines them together. So actually there's a fifth trade. The lazy one. So with all that, what do? First, go to your local bookstore or comic shop. I highly recommend using Comic Store Locator. Just put in your zip and see which one works for you. Though if I could recommend, if you live near these areas, I would say visit Carolyn John's in Northeast Ohio, a comic shop in Orlando, and House of Secrets in Burbank. Anywhere else is up to your judgment. Second, know what characters or series you want to read. Looking at the shelves can be intimidating, but any good comic store will be happy to listen to what you like to read and offer the best book for you to start. Heck, don't be afraid to start off with just a genre in general. There is a comic for everything. 3. The internet is your friend. Feel confused about a plot point or reference? You can easily look it up since there is a whole fandom of people cataloging this stuff, and it can help you find books that fit what you're looking for. Take this next one with a grain of salt, but when I started out with comics, I went outside of the big two because the whole shared continuity came off as too intimidating at first to me. In fact, the first comic I started to really get into was Fables, which, if you really want to read a good version of Once Upon a Time, then read Fables. It's amazing. I just pissed off a lot of Once Upon a Time fans, didn't I? Look, comics can seem scary and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. If you want to get into one of the big universes, then go for it. Want to read only certain characters? Have at it. Only want to read indies? Good for you. You will be amazed just how much the medium can offer. In fact, if I were to list some recommendations, I would say Fable, Saga, and Ms. Marvel are obvious ones. The new Teen Titans is great retro fun. The recent Vision comic is amazing. Watchmen is a necessity. Oh, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur is freaking amazing, and you should read it right now because who wouldn't want to have a dinosaur as a pet? I could go on and on about good comics to check out, but I think that's enough for this week. What about you, Internet? What are your thoughts about comics? Got any of your own suggestions? How did you get into comics? Have any advice I didn't cover? Leave a comment down below and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. But now, it's time to get back into the swing of things by tackling one of my personal favorite comics. Till next time, like, share, and discuss, and have a nice day.